Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the City of North Glenn's first community listening session with the Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Equity Board, as well as the Equity Project, who will be facilitating this conversation. The purpose of our listening session today is to really get a gauge on the community of how you feel the city is doing in terms of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we want to hear your thoughts and any recommendations that you have. And our diversity board is listening in, and they'll be taking your feedback and incorporating that into their work plan. And ultimately, the diversity board will be making recommendations to City Council. So thank you again for joining us. And I want to introduce you to Monica Williams, who is with the Equity Project. Monica is currently the executive producer and expert consultant at the Equity Project LLC. Her role is to partner with organizations in assessment, strategic planning, consulting, facilitation, and implementation related to creating more equitable outcomes through diversity, inclusion, equality, justice, and engagement. Monica is the former director of equity inclusion at Denver International Airport. Monica established and led the Office of Equity and Inclusion, including key areas such as diversity, equity and inclusion, employee engagement, civil rights programs, and future workforce development. She was responsible for leading the organization's assessment, creation, design, implementation, and execution strategies to achieve measurable outcomes. Monica is skilled at connecting with audiences at every level of an organization to gain followership, sponsorship, and adoption of DEI principles. She remains focused and intent on creating a culture of equity and inclusion within workplaces and communities through her leadership, action, and advocacy. It is her life's work. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much, Rupa, in the city of North Glen. I am so pleased to be here with you this evening. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's been a long time coming. And so I just appreciate you all being a part and spending an hour and a half with me this evening. So I will warn you though, this is a listening session. You're not going to be listening to me. I'm going to be listening to you for most of it. So just FYI, what we're intending to do is to hear from you. As Rupa mentioned, the DISE board is hoping to incorporate what we learned from you all today into their plans. And their plans are to impact and to better the city of North Glen and the recommendations that they'll propose the city council and that sort of thing. But this is important for us to hear from residents and business owners and people who care about the city of North Glen. And so we'll be hoping to listen to you this evening. I'll provide some opportunities where we can level set on common language, common terminology, and then I'll pose several questions to you all in hopes that you will give us your very needed perceptions and experiences. And so this is meant to be interactive. And when you can, if you're able to turn on your video, that's just another way that we can connect in this virtual world. So if that's up to you, but if you can turn your video on, would love to see your faces. All right, so let's proceed. First thing I want to do is to share this image with you. We utilize this image a lot because it speaks to a lot. Now, before I go into what I think it speaks to, I'd like to hear from you. When you see this image, what are your first thoughts about this image, or how would you caption it? How would you caption this image?
It's our current political climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kirk, I would certainly agree with you. Definitely. I hear that quite a bit. It's our current political climate. Absolutely. Who else?
I'd say privilege.
Privilege. Good one.
Yes, maybe a little selfish.
Selfish. Yeah, I can see that too.
I was going to say it's almost a little bit like Schadenfreude, but not exactly, because they're not exactly happy that the other people on the end of the boat are sinking. But just happy that they're not in that bad, precarious situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
On
Any other
just about any problem, if everybody works together, it will be better off for everyone in the long run.
Yeah, you're so right, Bob. That's one of the best things about this for me. And that is that especially in leading equity, inclusivity, and diversity work, it has to happen in a collective. It is not something that one individual can change and can fix the problems for all, right? This is something that we all can play a role, and we all have a role in dismantling even systems of inequities, and to be that person who is bringing others in and meeting your neighbors and creating the communities that we all want to live in and that are inclusive of all. And so this image is all of the things that you all talked about to me too. I just want to point out that one of the things about it is there's a perspective based on how people are positioned around the boat, right? People have a perspective and a position depending on where they sit. And in this case, we have some that may be kicking back because the whole is not on their end. And so there are others who the hole is on their end and they're trying to get the water out, right? While others are standing by. And so one of the important things about this image is thinking about what's your position in the boat. What is your position in the boat? What's your role? And how, if we worked in a collective, we'd be a lot further along, because guess what? Even though the hole's not on your end, if that boat sinks, we all sink. If that boat sinks, everybody goes down. So that is important for us to think. And so depending on where people are positioned in the boat, that leads to your consciousness. What is your level of consciousness based on your position in the boat? And how might you pivot or switch or, just be adaptive to others and what others might be experiencing within your community? So it's just really something to think about. So we like to call this, what we're in right now, what we're sitting in, is this idea that we're in the midst of about at least two pandemics. The pandemic of COVID-19 meets pandemic of race and social injustices that have surfaced over the last year. I've had more conversations about the climate that we're in, the challenges that we're facing, than any other time. I'm telling you, like I do this work, so that might be part of it. But at the same time, my friends, my family, others, like it's on our minds, it's on our hearts. And so, and obviously this is something that we all are impacted by in one way or another. And so it's almost like that boat too. And just thinking about what is our position in it and how can we be reflective of what others might be also experiencing. Any thoughts on that? How does this land on you? And how are you doing? That's even a better question. How is it landing on you? How has this idea of us sitting in at least two pandemics, how have you shifted, changed as a leader, as a community member? How has it impacted your experiences in your community? How are you doing? How are you faring as things continue to happen, right? The newsreel continues to flow with something. How are you doing?
DISE members, you can feel free to jump in if you want to try and start the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I feel like it obviously could be better than what it is now, but I feel like as long as we work together, like you were saying in a previous picture, teamwork is the most important thing here. And as long as we're together, we can get pretty far. And I think we just need a few more people with us.
Yeah, Rihanna, I appreciate that. What are other thoughts? How's everyone faring during this time?
I'll share. I'll
Thank
I'll
you.
always like jump in and share, but I also will take my voice out of it when appropriate too. But I can sort of get us going. I feel like something, definitely feel this. I'm doing fine, but I've had a heightened sense of call to action for the past, I mean, really like since the pandemic hit. It was like pandemic hit, call to action, help the community as much as I can. And then, when all of the racial injustice events started to happen over the summer, it, called me in a deeper way than I was already engaged. And I
Mhm.
think that for me, what the biggest feeling that I've felt during this whole time is a more profound understanding of like what community care can mean, should mean. It's like we talk a lot about self-care in,
Mm,
the world.
yeah,
And I've just had like new understandings of, yes, self-care important, but when isolated from a sense of community care falls flat, and vice versa, right? Like we all need
yeah,
to be taking care of ourselves and each other. So it's
yeah.
definitely launched me to get more involved in the community in terms of like, you know, justice movements and justice work and activism. So I feel
Thank
activated.
you. Feel activated. Thank you, Lauren. In a time like this, your activation is needed more now than ever. Thank you so much for sharing that. You had me to really think about something that I hadn't in the words that you used. Community care. That's what this is all about, really. If we talk about the collective, that's what we're thinking about, is not just those that are in our immediate care, ourselves and, family members and friends that we're close to, but even people we don't know,
Mhm,
even people that we don't know yet, I
mhm,
should say, that sense of community that is so important in building.
mhm,
We need community to build,
mhm,
right? And to change and to create and to strengthen.
mhm,
We need community to be strong. We
mhm.
really do. We can't
And
do it by
I mean,
ourselves.
it's interesting how like mutual aid movements have really flourished during this time, and I've begun to participate in things like that too. But it's like the idea of just listening to people and offering support when they need support and not asking
Mhm,
questions is kind of revolutionary, but
mhm.
it's also really effective.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if it makes you feel comfortable, if you need some support, just ask. People say
Mhm.
okay, and you know, so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
encouraged by that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your sharing. Who else?
Monica, real quick, can you let some folks in the waiting room?
Yeah, I don't see anyone in the waiting room. And I'm not a host.
Anna made you a host.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone right now. I did let in a couple of people, but I'm not
Okay,
seeing
perfect.
anyone.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much. Now, anyone else want to share before I move on? Come on, one more person.
I'll chime in.
Okay, thanks, Autumn.
I think kind of where I'm struggling is connecting. How do we actually work within these systemic, oppressive, racist systems that currently exist? How do we work within those structures to make life better for those who are on the downside of that, right? Like our being part of the DISE board was a huge call to action for me, in the sense that I thought, well, I can look and listen and try to take some action. But how do we prevent it from being performatory You know, we don't want to just say we're making these changes, or
Right.
yeah, we'll listen to you, but we really we're handcuffed by, you know, the system that is in place, which is our government. And so it's hard to work outside of those realms. And so I'm hoping that by listening to the needs of the community and North Glen being really open, that we're able to come up with something that actually addresses the root of the problem and doesn't just put a Band-Aid over it for now. And right now I feel like that's really what I'm seeing everywhere, is there's Band-Aids, but no one's really addressing it. We know what the problems are, but how do we get around it? It's a roadblock to creating those lasting changes. So I'm feeling like I see all these great things, but I don't know how to make them happen.
Mhm. Yeah, Autumn, thank you. It is perplexing and it is complex because there's so many systemic barriers that exist. But and also I would say we don't necessarily have a good model for an for equity and for equitable systems, because the majority of the systems, if you think about the justice system, the education system, housing, healthcare, if you think about those systems, they're not necessarily designed for equity. And so we're doing new work. This is new work that we're doing as a country, as a nation. And as we're doing this new work, it does take all of us, but it takes us first interrogating our systems, examining our systems. And we're going to talk about some of that today. And so I hope that in the line of questioning that we can get, you know, community members, all of you, to weigh in on what you think the challenges are and where you think the barriers are, so we can start taking them down, so we can start alleviating them. Mm-hmm.
Can I suggest to look for people who have beat the racism? Look for Hispanic leaders, African-American leaders who have become successful, and see the way they did it. See how they overcame obstacles and learn from those. And mainly teach the young people how to overcome the problems the same way that successful people have. And there are plenty of successful people in the North Glen and North Metro area out there.
Yeah. You know, Bob, I appreciate you raising that. Success is relative though. What determines success for someone, right? And what does someone have to overcome that someone else doesn't have to overcome to be successful? And so we get a chance to examine that, because it can look different depending on who you are, what success looks like, and who gets to decide what it looks like, right? So thank you so much for raising that. So I want to just share this with you also. So the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. This grief cycle is something that I'm presenting to you because the way in which our worlds have been impacted, that we didn't sign off on. I didn't sign off on a global pandemic. I didn't sign off on racial injustice. I didn't sign off on any of those things, but yet we're facing them and we're leaning into them and we're actually navigating them. Like it's been at least a year, a little over a year, and we have navigated some of the health pandemic, and we're sitting in a different place than we were this time last year. And there's been ingenuity that has come out of it, business opportunities that have come out of it. And so in some ways, we've become stronger together and joined together and strengthened, and if you think about our frontline workers, our service providers, our healthcare professionals, those that sacrifice their lives to care for others. I mean, there's a lot of pluses that have happened, but I just want to point this out because this grief cycle is not just pertinent to death and dying, but it also is pertinent to what we're experiencing and what we have experienced. And that is change. That is the world that we once knew is gone. I don't know if we'll see the world in the way we did before COVID-19. I don't know. And so we are navigating through this grief cycle. It's not just linear though. So I can go from one stage in this grief cycle and an incident can happen and I'm back in another stage, or I advanced in another stage. It's complex, but I just want to share it with you real quick. I won't spend a lot of time with it, but denial, avoidance, confusion, elation, shock, fear. That happened pretty much. If I think about myself, that happened for me when I found out I needed to be safer at home. I almost said stuck, but I meant safer at home. I had to be safer at home. And I didn't have a warning. I didn't know it was coming. It just happened, right? So I was in denial for some period, like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, is this really happening? And then anger at a lot of the racial injustices that have surfaced. It's not that this is the first time that they've been happening. They've been happening, but they continue to happen. And I do hit anger when things happen there. Okay. Frustration, irritation, anxiety. And there's been recent events here in Colorado. The shooting that happened in Boulder. I mean, we're facing into some very troubling times. And you may be navigating this cycle of grief during that. And depression, being overwhelmed, helpless, hostility, flight. I just want to run, like, away. And so depression can look like a whole lot of different things, right? It could be anything from comfort food all the way into, I need clinical support. I need clinical help. And then bargaining is when you're struggling to find meaning and you're reaching out to others and you're telling your story and others are telling their story. And acceptance is exploring options where you have a new plan in place though, and you're moving on. Some of us are at different points in this grief cycle. But I want to tell you about the bottom bar because that's what you need a whole lot more of to move from one of the cycles of grief to the other. And so the important thing is that you don't stay in one of these too long, okay? So information and communication when you're experiencing denial and anger, you need more information. You need data, you need facts, not a narrative, not a spin, but you need facts. Because oftentimes, because of our news cycles, we can sometimes be fed information that's not always the most accurate, may not tell the whole story. And as a society, we often live in episodes. We live in episodes that don't always paint the before and the after. It's a snapshot. So we have to be more clear about what's the facts? What does the data tell us? What happened? What preceded this? What surrounds this? So that we're informed. And then depression, I already talked about the range of emotional support that you need when experiencing depression. And then bargaining and acceptance, that's where we need guidance and direction. We need a plan. We need and so especially when you're in a leadership position or when you're guiding or leading, even your family, where you can provide guidance and direction is super important. I have teenage boys. And with my teenage boys, I've noticed them in these different stages of the grief cycle. So it's also important to not just know where you are in this grief cycle, but know where others might be too. Where are other people around you in this grief cycle? And then I want you to think about something. Imagine if you come across someone who's in anger and you're in acceptance, or someone who's in bargaining and you're in denial. What do you think that interaction could look like? Think about coming across someone who's at a different stage in the grief cycle and what that might be like. What do you think?
There can be some hostility, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, Chase, definitely. Hostility. miscommunication, misunderstanding. Anyone else?
There can also be some uplifting or inspiration there too. The other person on the positive side could uplift or start bringing over the other person, helping them
I
through
love
their
that.
stages.
I love that. I love that. I've advanced through this cycle. I could help someone else. I love that more than you'll ever know. Reach back, look back. It could be positive too. Certainly. Now, if you took yourself off mute, I'm thinking you're going to say something. Erin or Martha, did you take your phone off mute for a reason? Kurt?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think there comes with going through that cycle, there comes a lot of like self-reflection. But on the flip side, there also can be some regression. If you meet someone who's in denial and then you're already at acceptance, you can kind of slide back into that depression stage of like, "Ugh, I feel hopeless time and
Yeah.
time again. I'm trying to get them out of denial without,
Mhm.
backfighting myself."
But I feel
Yeah.
like that's also the good thing about it being a cycle. It's like a circle. If you got to the acceptance once, you could get back there, even if you do slide back, there's always a way.
Mhm. Anyone else?
The process is inherently messy. Um, you never go from one to the next to the next to the next and happily skip right along.
Yeah.
Just like we've been illustrating, you can be, and in fact, I find for myself, in some places, in some topics, some issues, I'm totally at acceptance. In other ones, I'm back at depressed or angry or those kinds of things.
Yes.
I wish I were a more coherent person, but I'm not.
Me too, Wesley. I agree. I can think of many points. We have high points, we have low points, we have midpoints, and you can be in different cycles, different stages in this grief cycle for a different situation. So I 100% agree with you. How do we navigate that? That's what I'm trying to, illustrate, is that we can navigate this, but what do we need more of? And how do we take care of each other? That community care.
One
Anyone
thing
else?
everyone has to remember is we're all individuals, and people will spend more time on certain cycles than other people. Some people may go through the denial longer and then just go through the anger to depression quickly. So
Yeah.
everyone has to know everyone's an individual and will go through the cycles differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree
You
with
can't
you, Pop.
expect them to be a robot and
No.
just
Oh.
be 5 days in this cycle, 5 days in that cycle, and 5 days in the other cycle.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that, does it? Not at all. But it's important and not to stay in one too long, right? Okay, well, thank you all so much for sharing. I appreciate you. This is a slide that I want you all to think about. This is where I start listening more. I've been listening all along, but like seriously, this is designed for me to listen. Okay. So I want to know, what are your hopes for diversity, inclusion, and equity work as it relates to the city of North Glen? And then you can see the pillars that North Glen is built on, and that's vision. North Glen is a diverse and welcoming community that celebrates its small town character, urban energy, and thriving businesses. Our commitment to provide a high quality of life to our residents and businesses through the provision of excellent municipal services. And then values our sustainability, inclusivity, innovation, and engagement. But I would ask you all, as community members, business leaders, business owners, residents, what are your hopes for diversity, inclusion, and equity, the work as it relates to the city of North Glen? I imagine you joined this call because you're interested.
Well, are you thinking in terms of hopes that each of us have individually, or hopes that we have in the grander scheme of hopes for the community?
I don't have a
both.
preconceived idea about any of that. However you want to convey it is fine with me, individually or as a community you live in, or work in, or play in, or give in.
Well, a very self-centered hope that I have is to be able to engage more out of my white privileged social community.
Mhm.
I've been over the past year or so trying to get more engaged, through the Black Lives Matter movement and related ones, and getting a better understanding of other communities. But I tend to feel lost because everything that's around me still is my standard white privileged lifestyle. And I just don't have as much opportunity, if it's okay to use this term, to practice engaging with
Mhm.
other communities.
Yeah, that's a fair point. How do you create an environment where I can get out of my day-to-day interactions that maybe look a certain way? How do we create spaces in the city of North Glen that allow for that, that create community for people to meet people who may not look like them, may have different experiences than them?
Yeah,
I
I
think,
would hope that I've had some good personal development over the past year or so, but it's hard to tell. And as I said, it's hard to put any of that learning that I've hoped that I've had into practice.
I got what you're saying. Yeah. So that's a good one for DISE to consider and to think about, for sure. Thank you, Kirk. How about someone else?
I think for me, I'm an educator, so a lot for me is just, again, getting out of my personal space and into a space where I can be an advocate for someone or for this community, and not only advocate but celebrate. I mean, we do have a diverse community, and that should be something that we can celebrate. A whole bunch of different people from different backgrounds coming together to make a space that is inclusive of everyone, and not only just tolerant of everyone, but just celebrating all the different perspectives that we have.
Nice. Thank you, Erin. I want to share a quick poll with you. So it's one question, but I just want to get a pulse from you all, and I'm hoping that everyone participates. So I'm going to launch the poll, and the question is, but it's really not a question. So I want you to respond with your level of agreement to this statement. The city of North Glen is inclusive of all diversity: race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, background, and experiences. What are your thoughts on that? Strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, or strongly agree? How would you respond to this?
I think your bottom two need to be disagree and strongly disagree.
Oh, yeah. How did that happen? Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to end that real quick. Sorry. How did I do that? Hold on a second.
Oh, but technology is always perfect.
Yeah, technology. That was me. That was my fault. Let me see something. I don't know if it'll let me do it. Okay. Here's what I want to do. The bottom two are disagree and strongly disagree. Forgive me. Even though I can't change it. Please respond again. Okay. 14 out of 24, 17 out of 24. Almost there, 19 out of 24. Seems like the majority of us are saying neither agree nor disagree at 43%. Unless there's a few more people, we have 3 more people who could take this poll. And then I'll share. I don't want to belabor it, but 22, well, 2 more people, and it might include me, so maybe 1 more person. All right, I'll end it, and then I'll share the results. So it seems as though the majority of you feel neither agree nor disagree. And then there are 4 people who disagree, 2 people who strongly agree in the statement, and 7 who agree. So you're anywhere, the majority are either agree or neither agree nor disagree. And so I'll download that for future reference. But I just wanted to kind of do that quick pulse before I go into this next line of information. Thank you all so much for participating in that. All right, so my next thing I want to talk about is this context, right? Start with this. Start with equity. Equity is what we're going to spend the majority of our time around, and the questions that I have for you are going to be about equity. But I first want to set the stage around what these other words mean, and then we'll talk about equity. So diversity, inclusion, equality, equity. This is not a math equation, so diversity plus inclusion plus equality does not equal equity. Also, this is not necessarily like if you have diversity, then you get inclusion, then you get, not that either. It's just laid out this way. Equity is the North Star though. I do want you to know that. But if you think about over time, we've spent the most time in equality. If you think about the equality movements like civil rights movement, gay rights movements, women's rights, those were all equality movements, ensuring everyone had equal access. And a lot of that came on the heels of legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and really trying to right the wrongs of the past, right? And so driving for equality for all is really where, as a country, we've spent the most time. Diversity movement came at a time where more women and people of color had entered in the workplace than ever, right? And so there was this idea that we need to manage this diversity, all this change, all this new diversity that's in our workplaces. And so that diversity movement, though, I would say kind of did some disservice to both people of color and to white people, because it told people of color that you're diversity, and it told white people that you're not diversity. And what that does is that puts a person of color at the center of ending their own oppression. And it tells white people that this is not you, that you can opt out of this. And so it's important when we think about what does diversity really mean. The way that it was defined is that people think when you say diversity, you mean race, or you might mean gender too. But generally speaking, when we say diversity, it's not generally when we're thinking about white male, for instance. But I want you to know that we need to reframe, we need to deconstruct what we say diversity means. We need to deconstruct it, because diversity is really all of us. We're all diversity, because diversity is just difference. So we're all part of that definition, not just people of color or women or gay or lesbian or, the LGBTQIA plus categories. It's all of us. Inclusion came also, but you can't really have inclusion without diversity, right? You need diversity to have that inclusion. Inclusion is what you do with diversity, how you leverage the diversity of all of us. And so I'll come back to equity in just a second. Now, Equality, those equality movements, it's all about sameness. It's about level setting, providing access. Equity, it is about creating systems where everyone can thrive. People don't get the same things, they get what they need, okay? And so when you look at this image, you can see equality. Now, what this image should say is that it's not a perfect depiction. Some of what I think about this picture is, it's just to help me make the point. It's going to help me make this point, but I don't think it's a perfect depiction. So equality, in equality, everyone got one box to see over the fence. Equity, not everybody got one box. Some people got 2 boxes. Some people got 1 box. One person got no box because they didn't need it to see over the fence. Liberation is the true equity opportunity, because in liberation, you don't have to worry about passing out boxes, right? You remove the barrier. You remove the fence. Where are the barriers in the system that are creating inequities for some, but not all? So when you think about equity, it is looking systematically, like Autumn was talking about earlier. When you think about liberation and equity, if you think about those, it's about identifying your opportunity areas that are creating inequities. But when you focus on equity, the systems, when you focus on those and you start taking down barriers for some, guess what? You take down barriers for all. And so equity is not pie, where we all get an equal slice, and if you get a slice, that means I don't get one. Equity is the tide that raises all ships. So that means it's not just those people who, need it the most. It removes the barriers for everybody. Does that make sense? So what we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk to you about diversity and inclusion, like the new definitions. Diversity, it is about honoring the richness and the beauty of the differences of all of us. It's all of us are in that definition. Inclusion is what we do with our diversity. So it's leveraging of the skills, the abilities, talents, and diversity of all of us, but we're always removing barriers for this to happen. Do you think that people are instinctively inclusive, or do they have to work at it? What do you think?
It's definitely both ways. Oops, sorry. Some people are very inclusive. They're born to be including and leaders and things, and some people shy away and don't really absorb other people or intentions or behaviors. So it's kind of both ways.
So the key is instinctively. Go ahead, Autumn.
I think that we tend to gravitate to those who are the same. And it's reflective in everything that you kind of see out there in the world, right? All the boardrooms. Who are those people in power? Gravitate towards those who look like them. And so that's where you feel safe. I think that that's kind of indicative of most people.
Yeah.
I suspect that we are inherently born more inclusive than we end up after our, the socialization when we're growing up. I think we have a lot of that beat out of us, not necessarily by evil intent, but just by, surviving in our particular family and neighborhood.
Yeah, I believe that go ahead, Chase, before I say.
I was agreeing, and I think that everybody has really good points. I think that it also really depends on the society that we're born into. Like you were saying, I think that America, we're so inherently, well, not inherently. There's this idea of individualism. I think that's really stressed. And, keeping to your own people and like stranger danger, all those things. I think that collectively, it's definitely made us distrust each other more than I think that is natural. But
Mhm. Yeah, I believe that we are more tribal and territorial as human beings. And I believe that part of that is instinctively for our safety. You think of friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe, to make snap decisions instinctively about like who's safe and who's not safe. And so it's part of how our brains process what is danger and what is not danger, right? Like it could, I'm going with danger, but you know, if you think about, um, you know, when we're creating, when we're first, we gravitate toward people who are like us. It doesn't mean that, you know, children don't have friends that don't look like them, but instinctively we want and desire to be around people who are like us. It's a comfortability that comes with that, right? And so we have to be intentional to be inclusive, to be more inclusive. We can't always trust our instincts when it comes to including people. So if you think about your closest circles, are they, I'm not saying you don't have exceptions in your circle, but when you think about the majority of your closest circles, are they people who more identify as you do? Are they people that, or are they people who don't identify like you do? Not just talking about family, I'm talking about people you get to pick and have chosen. If you think about those closest to you, to, you know, think about what are they more like you or less like you? Celeste, you're gonna say something?
Sure. I would say in the last year, I have really culled my group and done that to reduce pain. So where I didn't previously have too many blocks, and I was really very inclusive, very open. And I would say this is true of my social media life. I went from being totally open, all is grand, and then I kind of whittled it down a little. I was like, I can't do this. Winnowed it down again a little bit more. And I mean, these might be people who went all the way back to my earliest of childhood to finally, I actually got off of social media because I didn't want those kinds of influences in my daily life, in my inner space, because it wasn't healthy for me. And it was consistently something that was making me uncomfortable without the ability to address it with anyone. And I think that it's largely tribal in terms of, and I would say a large chunk of it came by way of the political climate.
Yeah.
But I chose for myself to say, you know what? I'm going to go a little smaller, going to go a little smaller, going to go a little smaller. And finally, I just got off entirely, feeling like, okay, I would be okay to be off of those things and take myself back to a time before social media where I engaged with people because they sent me an invitation or because they called me or because I called them. And not sort of looky-looing into their window, because a lot of times what you see in those circumstances, or at least what I was seeing, was reactionary or situational views that someone was having without actually sharing their broader sense of self. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Les. I
Sure.
hear what you're saying. Let's see. So I want to talk to you now based on what are, for your community, what are the fences we need to be working on today? So this is an exercise where I want us to name the fences. And those are the barriers in the system. Remember the image about equity. Name the fences that need to be worked on in the city of North Carolina. What are those fences? This is where we need all of you to chime in here. Oh, someone gonna say something?
This group is a start communication. Communication, getting to know each other. Almost everybody has something in common. Find out what we have in common and focus on that more than the differences. You were talking about people gathering together. I think you're just more in your comfort zone with people who think like you. But to get out of your comfort zone, communication is the key.
Yep.
And thank you for putting this together. This is a big step in that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob. Thank you. So some of the fences or the barriers are lack of communication. We need more opportunities like this to connect with people who may not live, or we may not be in touch with otherwise.
Economic barriers.
Okay.
Like, for example, we're all speaking together on computers. What about if somebody wanted to be involved but doesn't have access to the internet? That would just be one barrier potentially that we could remove.
Yeah, that's very good, Chase.
I feel like another one could be education, because a lot of jobs and other schools of higher education need a GED or some higher education, and that kind of blocks us because some of us don't have the ability or strive for the knowledge that we need.
So you're saying education is a barrier? Okay. What else? What are the fences? Think about your experiences in North Glen because this is our opportunity to create change, but we have to identify where are opportunities. Where are the barriers? Think about your experiences, where you live.
Something that I've noticed is that when the conversation of race is brought up, a lot of people like to shy away from it and think of it as something that's scary. And I think that it definitely can be, but if we create a safe and open environment where everybody can share their thoughts like we're doing today, it will be much easier for everybody to communicate and get all of these ideas out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. So a barrier being just people's willingness, their level of courage or level of willingness to even have these conversations. Someone put in the chat, or Wesley put in the chat, language barriers. I could see that too. What else? Think about your experiences where you serve, eat.
I agree completely with the last speaker about sort of supporting courage around having conversations, especially around race. And then I also feel like there is a lack of allocation of resources to social programs. I'm thinking specifically of support for our houseless community, and how so much of the resources go into policing the houseless community instead of you know, we have no shelters in North Glen and very few resources for them. And I think that that is something which sort of trickles out and creates this sort of sense of fear and sense of division as well.
Mhm. Yeah, very good, Alex. Thank you so much. I agree. That can be definitely a barrier. We have some things in the chat. Community spaces, barriers. Celeste, did you mean the lack of community spaces or
Yeah,
the community spaces are barriers? Okay,
yeah.
lack of. Wesley, COVID isolation has a shying away from engagement. That's a huge one that I would agree is that because of us, you know, where we want to engage, we have now barriers to that. And so that's something that we have to figure out for sure. Trust is a barrier. The it goes with the courage piece. I would like to build more trust with people who have had past bad experiences with government and police. Thank you, Catherine. I really like that. Like that is, you know, how do we bridge gaps? How do we build bridges to each other where there have been bad experiences? How do we rebuild trust? Mm-hmm.
I think another kind of barrier is like we need to develop understanding between others. So like sometimes we're stuck on a mindset. So oh, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you a little bit better.
Oh,
It's getting better and better.
sorry. I was saying that like I think it's important to build understanding between people because sometimes we're stuck in a mindset where like I'm right and you're wrong. But if we just listen, we can be like that understanding can be really important, and I feel like can be a fence or barrier in today's world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. What do you think about if we focus this into the systems? Justice system, education system, housing, healthcare. Do you see any fences relative to North Glen?
I could speak for a moment here on that.
Sure.
We get, as on the city council, we get residents calling to complain about the homeless problem. And, you know, they don't like seeing homeless people in the parks or things like that. And we also get residents who complain that the city isn't doing enough to help the homeless. And so I think whatever systems that the state, the county, and the city of North Glen has in place to deal with the issues that come along with people experiencing homelessness, those systems are not working.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's definitely something that needs to be worked on. And a big part of that, I do think, is communication. And it's just, you know, it's such a complex problem. And I think we need everybody's help and not just people wanting the city to somehow make it go away.
Yeah. I appreciate you. Thank you. I agree. Anyone else?
I also feel like involvement could be another barrier. People are shy or too scared to go up to someone else or like be involved in something. And so when we don't have enough involvement, things don't change as much and we don't see as much of a difference. So the involvement piece is a very big barrier.
Thank you. Any others before I move on to the next one? Okay, so being able to identify the fences and the barriers is going to be super important. So this next question, in your opinion, what are the priority areas to focus on in order to advance equity in our communities? Where should we start? Where are the priorities?
opportunity needs to be there. Everyone needs to have opportunity. Opportunity, we brought up education, employment. Everyone needs to have that opportunity and learn how to find that opportunity.
Mhm.
I also just kind of want to signal boost that and say that I think there needs to be opportunities for us to kind of come together as a community to discuss some of these issues and discuss some of these fences, because it helps to get other people's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. We need more people like you all on this call coming up with solutions and where the fences are. So I think continuing to have this dialogue and these conversations and kind of enhancing it, blowing it out even more would be super important. Getting more voices at the table. So on this, what other priority areas? Do you think right now there are certain communities? So we talked about those experiencing homelessness, but do you think that there are, if you think about your community, do you think that there are pieces or parts or people in your community that are experiencing North Glen in different ways?
Can I speak to this a little bit? I'm not going to give a ton of details just because I don't want anything bad to happen because I know it's recording. But nearby to where I am, there are some individuals who live in tents kind of like further back in like where the greenery and stuff is, like so they're kind of hidden back there. But I mean, those are individuals who are houseless, who are homeless, and they're like right here in our neighborhood. And so clearly those are people who are experiencing North Glen in a very different way from me. Like they're like living in tents like when it's snowing and it's super hot. I don't know. It's just I think that definitely I appreciate it being brought up because it is because I know they're there. It's like a constant like there is something that needs to be done. Like
Yeah. Sounds like that's a priority area for you all. What else?
and then I'm just gonna keep talking. Because as an Indigenous person, I think I really would love to see North Glen speak more to that. I would really love there to be more, I guess, acknowledgement that North Glen is on Indigenous land. I don't know, just more talk about colonialism and decolonization and the history of Colorado. I don't know.
Yeah, very good.
Indigenous rights are important.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What could city leaders do that would really make a difference in advancing equity?
Universal income.
Universal. Tell us more about that, Autumn.
There was actually, I want to say, a small city in California that implemented a program where they gave every citizen $500 every month, regardless of what their standing was. And they did it for a set amount of time. And what they found was there was more investment back into the community. So people had money and resources, didn't have to work themselves to death because they had that extra money. Not that it was extra in some cases, right? People were using it to fix their car so they could get to work, so they had their job, or they used it for, sorry, big dog.
Okay, don't worry.
They found that basically, you know, there's a lot of people who will say, oh, they're just going to use it and buy, you know, junk or garbage, but the research actually proved them wrong, that the universal income that they were receiving actually provided them a safety net and created more buyback into the community, which actually strengthened everything. So there are some programs that are out there that are having some positive effects.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Autumn. Interesting. What else? You have the city's ear and you don't have any ideas?
Just building off of that kind of idea and sort of what I had mentioned before about the social programs, I really want to see the city retain its commitment to examining how our police department is using its funding. We have a very well-funded police department, and I'm really glad that the community co-produced policing board has been established. And I'm also, I want to make sure that it is not swayed too heavily by people who really, are, and I get it. We have some individuals in our police department who are wonderful human beings as individuals. Systemically, I have some concerns about how that money is being spent, and especially how that money is not being spent in terms of other programs that could be supporting our community in stronger ways.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. I like that idea. That is definitely something to city leaders have control over, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Celeste, please.
Perhaps there could be some more visiting and more listening into the different neighborhoods in our community. I've lived here for about 22 years, and I've noticed in recent years a whole lot of garbage around, like ridiculous. And it seems to me that the people who are running the city could do a good job of running the city by looking at our city critically, from taking a look at the businesses that come in to what our corners look like, what our neighborhoods look like. And really it has to do a lot with who lives here, about why there might be garbage, everywhere. But I feel like North Glen has taken a really big backslide in terms of its sort of community image and what people experience when they drive our main thoroughfares.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Sorry, I have one more thing. Not to belabor the point about the unhoused community, but we don't have a shelter here in North Glen, and the intake location for the emergency shelter is in Brighton, and that's an impossible trip for people who are under-resourced, and so I really would like to see city leaders making sure that those resources are here in North Glen for our North Glen community who is unhoused, because I know a lot of the unhoused community. They're wonderful, they're incredible people, and the answers that they get to a different place, and I think that that's something that we really could take a look at critically as a city.
Okay, thank you.
Alex Morgan, yes, that's your name, correct? I've really appreciated all that you've brought to this conversation, and I think that I speak on behalf of most of DISE. It sounds like you have some good connections with the houseless community. Maybe we could invite you to one of our meetings if you were fine with that one day eventually.
Yeah, that would
If
be
that's fine.
fantastic. That would be fantastic.
Maybe if Autumn is cool with that, just because I think it would be great if we had that kind of connection.
That's good. connecting. That's good. What do you think as far as, do you think that people that have different racial backgrounds have different experiences in North Glen? I see some heads nodding. What do you think that looks like? And where in terms of equity? I saw your heads nodding, so you must know something.
Well, I'll just tell a story about a resident who I spoke to,
Okay.
and he is Black, and he had recently gotten custody of his two children, and he was as a single parent, a father. He was trying, with a lot of new experiences, so he was trying to register his children for North Glen, a school in North Glen, I should say. I don't want to get too specific, so he took his children to school, before it started, when he thought it was like an open house, or he thought that was when he would register, and he was told that he should have done it all online, which he did not know, and so he felt like the secretary who was explaining this to him was um, not very patient with him, or just expecting that he should know things. And the discussion escalated to the point where the school security officer, resource officer, was called and got involved. And it just really sounded like a very, terrible situation that I feel, and he certainly felt, would not have escalated to the point it did if he had been white and his children were white. So that's one example that I can give, and it's not for me personally. I acknowledge my privilege as a white woman, but this resident, this is the kind of person that I would really love to have get involved in these kind of discussions. And unfortunately, as someone in the chat mentioned, people work full time, and he's a single parent, so there's not. It's more of a challenge for the people we really want to hear from to come and speak in these listenings, tours, or whatever we want to call it. It's kind of a frustration of mine that I don't know how we can make it easier for people who we really want to hear from to have the chance to talk to us.
Yeah. Might be figuring out how we can make that happen. I appreciate everybody in the chat who's also weighing in and responding. I appreciate that. And I feel like the DISE, is that what you called it? We'll appreciate that too. So next question. What would it take to more fully engage you in the process of advancing equity? Now, I realize that you all are engaged in some way because you're here. So the question is, maybe even if it's not just you, what about others? What do you think it would take to fully engage others in the process of advancing equity? If you consider yourself fully engaged, what would it be to advance, to get others engaged?
I feel like having the time is a big disadvantage, because a lot of us have busy schedules and things to do, so we don't have the time to try and engage or want to try.
Time.
Once again, communication, let people know who don't have the time that they have their representatives, just like Catherine gave us an example. Let them know that where to go, who to speak to, and where they can be heard. Once again, they may not have the time to do it themselves, but to find a representative like Catherine and Julie that will listen and will help take care of them. And other councilmen too. I see there's other councilmen. I just know Mike too.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I think for me, would really help me engage more is just being able to learn. I'm relatively new to North Glen, so learning more about kind of like the history around here, and like Chase was saying earlier, acknowledgement of where our roots are and where historically we've seen problems in our community, and then moving forward, getting other people's perspectives. I mean, I'm going to say it, a lot of us on this call are white, and we have a very single perspective on this issue, and being able to hear someone else's perspective would be very helpful and engaging.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I agree with you.
I also agree with that. And I think that representation can really begin in simple places like on social media. And I do feel like the advertising and social media from North Glen tends to be very white. And so that would possibly be a place to start with representation and comfort for people of color to join in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Taylor. That's good. Good call out. What else? Any other ideas, like what, because we should brainstorm some ideas about how we could get people who, for instance, aren't represented here today, how we could get them more involved and, get the word out to engage. If you have any ideas, please say them out loud, or you can enter them into the chat too.
So I think I don't have a solution, but I want to reiterate that, several people of color who are frontline workers don't have the luxury of sitting on a call at 5 o'clock at night to engage in this type of conversation. It takes away from them being able to bring money into their household. And so, this is a problem I've been dealing with, because on other boards, people are talking about how do we get more people of color on our boards? How do we engage them? And, it's one thing to be a person of color who's, white presenting, and I have that privilege, but, I see firsthand the people in my family who don't have that. And I know what the struggles are. And I know that there's ongoing discussions about getting people to the table. I don't have a solution, but I want us to think about that. Like when we do this stuff, when we have engaging conversations that are taking place during work hours. And like I said, this is not typical work hours for everybody. Some of us are off by 4 because we're working a 9 to 5, but our frontline workers don't have that luxury. And those are the voices that we need. And so I really want this group to be creative and think outside the box, and how do we get those voices included? Is it knocking on doors and, having those one-on-one conversations with them when they are home, creating rapport so that they do feel comfortable with those of us who are in the community that are actually out trying to make the change, enact the change that the community would like to see, that their voices are valued. That's something we can do. I hope COVID has really put handcuffs on us when it comes to outreach. And so that's a struggle. And, hopefully that is something that lifts soon, that we can start creating those one-on-one relationships, but we have to create trust, and there's just not trust with the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Autumn, for sure. Not having trust with the community. So that's very different than having access or time or resources. Why do you think that there's a lack of trust with the community?
Well, I would say part and parcel to that, right? Like, if we only have white presenting or white privileged individuals that are doing the work, why would I engage with that, right? Yeah. Like, I don't see myself in that leadership, in that role. I don't see myself there. Why would I engage with that? Why would I trust you to make a decision on my behalf? And that's the crux. That's the crux of it, right? You may not have done something to me that doesn't make me trust you, but the perception right now in this white world is white is privileged. And so that's the barrier that we have to break down. It's not necessarily because someone's done something to create this. That's just kind of the sentiment.
Gotcha. I hear you. Thank you for clarifying. You know, I had a thought as you were speaking, and I know we're wrapping up on time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Rupa in a second. But I want to know your perspectives on businesses, business owners, and what do you think that opportunities exist for people with all types of backgrounds, races, religions, are able to start business in the same ways? Are there barriers in how people gain opportunities for business? Housing. I mean, the list goes on, but that's one way to consider this. Is, do people have the same opportunities? Are there barriers for some and not all? And what is representation in business owners in North Glen? Small business owners, medium business owners. Does anyone know? Have any viewpoint into that?
We're working on, I think, getting that data because that's something that we are interested in. So it's on our to-do list to get that information. So we are aware of that. I mean, my perception when I come to North Glen is that there's pockets of small businesses that maybe it's not, we have a lot of like shopettes that aren't very inviting, that call people in to just want to go in and shop and spend our money there, right? Or we have big box retail like Lowe's and Cinzetti's, and you know, there's not a lot of mom and pop inviting to create that culture. It's kind of generic. So I mean, that's also, I think that's one of my pie in the sky is reaching out, doing some transit oriented, culturally aware projects in the city, but we're not there yet.
Not yet. That's very good. Is Cinzetti's open? I'm asking for a friend. It is open.
Yes.
Last
Also,
Friday,
to be fair, I think Cinzetti's only has like one other location. I think we looked it up.
I've only
So
been
I think
to
it's
that
actually a
one
small business.
Brooklyn. I love Cinzetti's though, but anyway, I didn't know if it
Come
was
on
still
down, Monica.
You have to make a reservation, so remember that.
Okay, reservation. That's very good. I've always had to make a reservation and it's always packed when I've gone. Okay, asking for a friend. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you all. I have one quote that I want. I like this quote by James Baldwin. And it is, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. I'm just going to leave it there, but I just want to thank you for your participation and for your time and for DISE. I'm seeing that you all, we haven't connected in a while, but I'm seeing you all are doing some amazing things. And I'm so proud of all the work and things that you've accomplished. And thank you so much, North Glen community members, city leaders, for allowing this space, Rupa, for everything that you do to put these things together and to support. But I thank you for your leadership. I saw Heather. Thank you so much, Heather, also. And that's my time. Thank you sincerely from the Equity Project and me.
And just to close out from the city in the chat, I'm putting a link to our survey that our DISE board has come up with. And I just want to acknowledge the council members that have been on the call. So Councilmember Catherine Goff, who is actually the council liaison to the DISE board. I saw Council Member Julie Duran-Mellica and Mayor Pro Tem Jenny Wilford also on the line. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to all of our DISE board. We have been listening to our community and we really appreciate you joining in, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.